those who are able, please rise for the rendering of military honors. Active duty members and veterans may render a hand salute. All others, please place your right hand over your heart.
Ready, 2, aim, fire. Ready, 2, aim, fire. Ready, 2, aim, fire. Detail, present. Arms.
On behalf of the President of the United States Navy, and a grateful nation, please accept this flag as a symbol of our appreciation for your loved one's honorable and faithful service. They represent the Navy core values of honor, courage, and commitment. Sorry for your loss. It's an honor to be here. I hope you honor it.
please stand?
Please be seated. Jesus said, I am the resurrection and I am the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, yet shall they live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. I died, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and I hold the keys of hell and death. Because I live, you shall live also. Dearly beloved, we're gathered together here in the sight of God to give witness to our faith, celebrate the life of Joe, Lynn, Vowell, Dad, Lynn. We come together in grief, acknowledging our human loss. May God grant us grace, that in our pain we may find comfort, in our sorrow, hope, and even in death, resurrection. Let's pray together. O holy Lord, who gave us birth, you are ever more ready to hear than we are to pray. You know our needs before we ask, and you know our ignorance in asking. Give to us now your grace, that as we shrink before the mystery of death, we may see the light of eternity. Speak to us once more your solemn message of life and of death. Help us to live as those who are prepared to die, and when our days here are accomplished, enable us to die as those who go forth to live, so that living or dying, our life may be in you, and that nothing in life or in death will be able to separate us from your great love in Christ Jesus, our Lord, who taught us to pray, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Let me just begin by saying thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. Feels a bit like that movie Groundhog Day. This has been a really intense 7 months. When we were here 2 months ago for my mom's memorial service, I said it might not be long till we were back again, and here we are. I just have to say, I've never been through a period of time, Tani and Shauna and I have never been through a period of time like the last 7 months. And yet, it's been incredible, the love that's been shown to our family. Not a day has gone by that people have not said, what can we do? People have said, how are you? I've asked Shauna that, I think, 10 times over the last 24 hours, 11. And I told people, and this is true, I said, I think I'll grieve Mom once we've buried Dad, because it's just been so busy, and that's probably been a mercy. But thanks you so much for your prayers, for the food, for the hugs, for the emails, for the cards. It's been incredible. It's been incredible. It's been good to know, as we were being overwhelmed, that you were with us in this, and your faith has been incredible for us and for the whole family. I want us to sing a hymn, and it's one that you know very well, but it's appropriate in a time like this because it's balm for our souls. Hymn number 378, verses 1, 2, 3, and 6, and the words should be on the screen. Let's stand as we sing.
has saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace hath brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we know less days to sing God's praise than when we'd first begun.
If you were here for Mom's service, you'll probably say Mark has an incredible lack of imagination, because Psalm 23 was in the bulletin there as well. But it's just, this is for me, and I know it's for you, and I know you know, if you've been in a time of grieving and really leaned on the Lord, this is a verse that just heals like no other. So let's take this medicine together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. As I introduce you, I'd like to invite all the grandkids to start making your way up here. We had the grandkids read scripture at Mom's service. We're going to have the grandkids read scripture at this service. Almost all of them were able to make it in. Their experiences with Mom were very different than their experiences with Dad. It's because Mom and Dad were both awesome people, but very different people. And so I'm just grateful that they can be here. Mom and Dad both just couldn't be prouder of their grandkids. And so I'm just going to let them take it from the top, beginning with Preston.
From Joshua, chapter 1, verses 5 and 7. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not fail you or forsake you. Only be strong and very courageous, being careful to act in accordance with all the law that my servant Moses commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, so that you may be successful wherever you go.
2 Corinthians chapter 4. But we have this treasure in clay jars, so that it may be made clear that this extraordinary power belongs to God and does not come from us. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed. Always carrying in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be made visible in our bodies.
Psalm 46, verses 1 through 3. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth should change, though the mountains shake in the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble with its tumult.
From the prophet Isaiah, chapter 34, verses 3 through 4. Strengthen the feeble hands, steady the knees that give way. Say to those with fearful hearts, be strong, do not fear, your God will come. He will come with vengeance, with divine retribution. He will come to save you.
From Paul's second letter to the Corinthians, chapter 12, verse 9 through 10. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will not boast, I will boast all the more gladly about my weakness, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weakness, in results, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties, for when I am weak, then I am strong.
From the prophet Isaiah, chapter 40, verses 28 to 31. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint.
From Paul's letter to the Ephesians, chapter 6, verses 10 through 13. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the power of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armor of God, so that one day, when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, and after you have done everything, to stand.
From Paul's letter to the Philippians, chapter 4, verses 12 and 13. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength.
From the prophet Isaiah, chapter 41, verses 8 and 9. But you, Israel, my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, you descendants of Abraham, my friend, I took you from the ends of the earth, from its farthest corners I called you. I said, you are my servant. I have chosen you and have not rejected you.
Chapter 41, verse 10. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand.
2 Timothy chapter 1, verses 6 and 7. For this reason, I remind you to rekindle the gift of God that is within you through the laying on of my hands. For God did not give us a spirit of cowardice, but rather a spirit of power and of love and of self-discipline.
Proverbs chapter 18, verse 10. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run into it and are safe.
We've had the privilege of having a lot of amazing people in our lives, both our mom and dad introduced to us. And so I get to share, it's kind of an occupational hazard, but there are some other people who have whole chapters that I've only heard about because I didn't live them. So I'm going to ask my really cool Aunt Linda Smith, Al Curry, Tawny, my sister, and Mark Davidson, my brother, to come and share about my dad.
Difficult to follow that beautiful solo, Shauna. Thank you. You've all heard the nursery rhyme. What are little girls made of? Sugar and spice and everything nice. And what are little boys made of? Frogs and snails and puppy dog tails. I don't think I've ever subscribed to this theory, especially in our lives. However, because of recent happenings, it did set me wondering, what are big brothers made of? And I could find no rhyme for that. So my thoughts drifted back to vivid memories of the time when we moved from Arkansas to Ector, Texas, in order for our father to attend Perkins School of Theology at SMU. I had finished 4th grade, and Lynn would enter 8th in the fall. And for some reason, our dad decided it would be a good idea for the two of us to be closer in school. So I was tutored that summer by a 5th grade teacher, a member of our church, by the way, and I entered 6th grade that fall. Those 3 years we lived in Ector were idyllic. Dad was gone all week to Dallas. Our mother was extremely busy. Now, she had a cow, she had chickens, she had a dog, she had 2 kids, and we had a garden. In addition to, she handled all the church activities during the week and did the church bulletins. After we helped, hopefully we helped a lot, we had the run of that little town. Lynn loved our horse, Tony, and rode him everywhere. He was awfully big to me, so I used a bicycle as my mode of transportation. Occasionally, we'd go down to the drugstore downtown, not too often, but they had this neat soda fountain with those cute little ice cream tables and those rounded chairs like you see in the antique shops now. And we'd order a cherry phosphate, maybe a really sweet fountain cherry Coke, or if we were really brave and adventurous, we'd order a lime Coke, and that would curl your tongue and your toes. Since Lynn was older, his interests were dominant, of course. Dolls never entered the picture. We played boy games. We shot BB guns, or they were shot at me, and really a wonder that no one was hurt. We would pack a picnic lunch of that sandwich spread that came in a jar, just spread it on a piece of bread, and maybe we'd make a Velveeta pimento cheese sandwich, and we'd ride down to the creek bed under a railroad trestle and play games for hours with our friends. We were pirates on that creek bed. We were Daniel Boone or Davy Crockett, searching for enemies or game. But mostly, we were cowboys and Indians. That was probably the time when Lynn began to develop his intense interest in Western life, as you know, which continued throughout his life. For a small town, Ector had a lot going on. Now, Daddy was very interested in developing our hitherto unknown talents. So Lynn took voice lessons, I took expression, and he saw to it that we were always performing, either at church or at school. We sang songs, we did readings, we did skits, we dressed up in costume. You know how it is with a preacher's family? Everyone does something. The two of us and a friend left school by ourselves once a week, walked to the railway station, and rode the train 6 miles to Bonham to take piano lessons. That was cool. When we were not in our lesson, we went to the movie. 10 cents a ticket at that time. Of course, being the youngest, I had the middle piano lesson, so I never did get to see a movie all the way through, even though I did see a lot of partial movies. I also remember shooting a great many basketballs through the hoop nailed to the garage while we lived there. We played lots of cards, flinch mostly, and we read vociferously. Now, there was always a dictionary by our side because we could not ask what the definition of a word was. We were told, look it up. That's the way you'll remember it. Those were truly halcyon days. Now, you may not have heard of the Methodist Church ruling that you may leave your conference for a number of years to further your theological education, but when you complete that, you must return to your home conference for at least 1 year. So, all of a sudden, our lives changed, and we moved back to Blytheville, Arkansas, which was much larger than our small town of Ector. Lynn was a junior in high school then. I was a freshman. Now, he made a big splash. He was good looking. He was an excellent basketball player who made the team. And there were plenty of pretty girls to date. I even made the girls' freshman team because of shooting all those baskets with him in front of our garage. Now, Lynn was nothing if not clever at working things out. He discovered that all these dates turned into a dance. You know, that dancing was very big entertainment in the 50s. We had sock hops, we jitterbugged, we did ballroom dancing. So, he found a pretty girl and asked her to teach him to dance. And then came home, taught me, and we practiced over and over and over for hours in our living room. We worked out some pretty spectacular dance steps and moves, and I retained a lifelong love of dancing. Now, he looked after me. He protected me as only a brother can, and I worshiped him. Thought he could do no wrong. Things don't always stay the same, though, do they? The next year, Mother and Daddy wanted to return to North Texas because they liked it so much. Lynn decided to stay in Blytheville for his senior year in order to continue playing basketball. He roomed at an elderly lady's home that year, and she taught him to bake, possibly the continuation of his love for sweets. He could always eat half a pie or cake when he was growing up, but one of his favorite recipes that he learned to bake was for buttermilk pie, and that became his specialty. I was devastated. My next 3 years of high school were spent moving to an ever larger school each year. No handsome big brother to pave my way there. When Lynn graduated from high school, he moved on to the University of Oklahoma. He did not make the basketball team there, but he did meet Glenda Jo Dillahunty. My high school graduation arrived, and here's senior prom. I had no date. I hardly knew anyone there. Lynn heard about it and breezed in. I thought later that Mother probably had a little something to do with that. He and she had a very special bond. A very sweet church member loaned me a beautiful formal. And Lynn and I wowed everyone at the Sunset High School senior prom in Dallas that year. At one point, we had a ring of watchers surrounding us, everyone saying, "Who is that guy?" Of course, I reflected it and basked in that reflected glory. I had a good job after high school working at the University of Texas Medical School in Dallas. Felt like I was really on my way. I was earning money typing. I was learning how to operate the switchboard. And I decided, I'm going to wait a year before I go to college. Lynn came home and said, "No way. If she does that, she will never go to college." Now, by this time, I'd become accustomed to thinking for myself and not appreciating his telling me what to do again. However, Mother and Daddy concurred, and I was off to OU under Lynn's watchful, ever watchful eye again. But those were wonderful years. I loved it. How many of you here attended OU? Let's hear some Boomer Sooners. Hey, Boomer Sooner. Those were memorable years. It was fabulous. But as mentioned before, Lynn resumed his big brother role, telling me what to do, who I should or should not date, etc. Now, when Lynn was ready to graduate from OU, it was determined that I would get to keep the old, I think, 4748 Mercury that had been in the family. Wow, that was something. Now, it wasn't a bottle green Jaguar like a couple of kids had. It wasn't even one of those cute little Volkswagen Bugs. But that was special because it was for me, and it was named Sputnik by my dad. Now, this is long before that Russian satellite was launched in 1957 named Sputnik. And if you go back and look it up, the original meaning of Sputnik was fellow traveler. Now, isn't that a neat name for a car? It sounds like we sputtered around all the time, but fellow traveler. So, as I say, that was pretty special. However, there was an entire list of instructions that came along with Sputnik. Number 1, do not loan Sputnik to anyone. Number 2, do not let anyone else drive Sputnik, period. Sputnik had this little habit of the stick shift locking. And if you did not know how to remedy that, it remained locked, and you were unable to drive. Well, of course, you know what happened. There was something, I can't even remember now why, but it was very, very important, and it was only for a very short distance. But I let someone use Sputnik. It locked up in front of a fraternity house where it spent the night because I couldn't go get it then. And as luck would have it, Lynn just happened by. I received a royal chewing out that I felt I only partially deserved. I realize now the concern and love and caring that went into all of these experiences that I could not or chose not to appreciate at the time. But now I know that's what big brothers are made of.
I came into the OU clan from New Mexico in my junior year, 1955. And as you may know, or I guess there's somebody or a few people here that may not know, but the University of Oklahoma had a special reputation. They had to be good in order to make the football team proud. So we were proud of the football team because Bud Wilkinson was there. And I don't know about Lynn before his junior year, but we never saw a losing football game while we were there. So we found that I was not able to, start my very first year at OU knowing Lynn, but I got to meet him over or around or behind and maybe sometimes under a ping pong table. Lynn was very competitive, and this was in the ROTC building. In fact, it was the area where the Naval ROTC was. And he and I both were in the Navy ROTC, and fortunately they had ping pong tables there. And so he and I would play ping pong together, and that started, oh boy, a long, long friendship. And then it really didn't get sparked too much. I graduated in August of '56. Lynn graduated in December. And of course, that was fitting. He was the younger of us, too, by some months anyway. And so the elders usually go first. So I got graduated on one day, got my commission the next day, had to wait till wash day to get married because everything else was taken on the weekend. So Lynn had to wait, at least I think he had to wait, because we both, I'm sure, I know I did, I signed a little contract with the Navy that I wouldn't get married till after I got my commission. So he, I'm sure, had to wait until he got married in December to continue on with Glenda. So that's where we kind of started from. Lynn and I had our fun times together in Naval ROTC, and then both of us had the desire to go let Uncle Sam teach us how to fly. And for some reason, even though Lynn graduated in December and I graduated in August, and we both had our commissions then, he got down to Pensacola before I did. And I think that had to do with the fact that he was a regular Navy person. I was in the reserve. And, I think they gave him preference. Anyway, it became, you might see in a little bit, that he was actually my senior in many ways, but not as far as the Navy was concerned on the list where the roster was because I had my commission before he did. But anyway, we were assigned to Pensacola for basic training and got surprised when saw Lynn was down there. But we didn't really have much time together. We finished up in Hutchinson, Kansas, a little bit different in time. And the Navy, being the generous folk they are, allowed us to choose where we might like to have our first active duty tour. Well, Joyce and I had never been to California, so we said, let's try for the West Coast. Don't know what Lynn and Glenda did, but I'm thinking they might have chosen the West Coast also. And I think that Lynn and I learned a lot about geography that we didn't know about. We discovered that the West Coast included Guam. And that was our first active duty assignment. In 1958, in the month of March, the Vowells were on Guam. I arrived in April of 1958. Joyce wasn't with me. It seems the Navy, having their rules like they do, required that housing be available for you and your spouse before the spouse could come over. And the BOQ was full. And of course, they weren't going to allow ladies to stay in the BOQ anyway. So I had to find an apartment. And I found, a perfect apartment. It was one that we could actually rent and get her over to Guam in as short a time as possible. Of course, even though it faced up against a junkyard, and there was the proverbial junkyard dog, got her over there. So 6 weeks passed about from the time that I got there till she was on her way. Well, as the Navy would like for us to do, and Lynn also, we were both flying in that squadron. We were flying the Super Connie, the pregnant version, with the big radome on top and the other big radome on the bottom. And we went out and found the 7th Fleet somewhere out in the Pacific and gave them extra radar coverage. And when I was out there helping with that coverage, and Lynn was, we weren't always I'd say hardly ever on the same crew, but we would quite often be with the same deployment. It was 4 to 5 weeks gone, and back on the island for 2 or 3 for training, and back out again. But we would be on the base wherever it was, Japan, Okinawa, Philippines, wherever. But we would spend the time together there part of the time. We would be either eating in the BOQ, maybe having something cold over there at the Officers Club. And you know what I discovered there? Lynn enjoyed a good story, especially one that could make him laugh. I don't know how many of you remember. He had a great laugh. And so that was kind of making the start of the friendship rise a little. But we were off, as I say, off defending the country, if you will. Joyce was in the air, heading to Guam while we were out there, maybe still drinking that cool one. And guess who met her at the airplane when she got off on Guam at the Naval Air Station landing strip? Glenda was there. Lynn and I were off out there defending the country. Glenda was there to meet Joyce because she found out somehow or another, and I probably think it was the commanding officer's wife who kind of kept track of those things. But I really knew that I was going to be gone, and Joyce knew it. But Glenda didn't know it, and Lynn didn't know it, but she was there to meet my wife. And that just started a bigger involvement with our friendship. And, being junior officers, we were just fresh out of school, fresh out of flight training, and freshly married for the most part. And what happens when you get married? You start having children. And Glenda and Lynn, the firstborn, I think she's sitting over here now in this blue outfit. Tawny was the firstborn, and she was born on Guam. Our daughter later on was born on Guam too. It's nice to have Guamanians in the family. Just ask my son or our son-in-law about that. That's another story. But they didn't allow in the maternity ward at the Naval Hospital much time to recuperate after the mothers had given birth. And so it was about 24 hours later, they told Glenda it was time for her and Tawny to leave. Well, Lynn and I had already left. We being the good people that we were, defending the country. And of course, Tawny didn't say when she was going to arrive. Maybe Glenda has some indication, I'm not sure. But anyway, we were off the island again when things were going along that really desired for us to be on the island, but wasn't to be. We had a little situation, didn't we? Glenda had a new baby. Lynn was off the island. I was. But guess who was right there? Joyce was there. And guess who took Tawny and Glenda home and stayed with them for a couple of days while Glenda was recuperating. In the meantime, I was on the way back, and Lynn was on the way back. But before either one of us got back, Glenda, being the person she was, decided I guess it was she had enough of Joyce, or maybe she decided she really wanted to take care of Tawny by herself. I don't know. You don't remember that, do you? Okay. Anyway, I guess Glenda, in so many words, asked Joyce, or told her probably, says, "It's time for you to go home." And so that's what happened. So Glenda took care of Tawny, and then, of course, Lynn got back within a reasonable amount of time. So that pushed the friendship up a little bit more. Now, we weren't there. Let's see, wasn't there somebody else that... Oh, sitting over here, Mark. You're the other Guamanian that's in the family, I believe. And but we weren't as involved with Mark's arrival as it was with Tawny, but we're glad you got there, though, Mark. So, okay. Eventually, it came time for us to leave. We'd been there around 2 years, probably. Glenn, at least a month longer. Lynn, just about a month longer than I was there. But I found out very recently that he was transferred to another squadron. And being the active duty regular Navy person he was. He was going to stay in for a while. I was going to go home and go back to school. Home was now going to be in Wichita, Kansas, because they didn't have any aircraft companies in Roswell, New Mexico. But they did have the aliens there, and they had some really nice spaceships, I understand. So I stayed long enough to shut down the squadron. You know, Lynn left me hanging. He ran off to have more fun flying, and I got to shut the squadron down. But that's the way it turned out. Him being, you know, active duty, regular Navy, and me being in the reserve. Well, the friendship was always there, but you know, Glenn was flying. I think maybe up there in the Northwest. Joyce and I were in Wichita with our Guamanian. We had our first daughter on Guam, and so we were in Wichita, and then what was going to happen next? Well, let's just find out. Glenda and Lynn came back to Texas. And even though we had been away from Texas, well, you know, we never were original Texans anyway, but back up just a little bit. We were in Wichita working for Boeing when the group I was working in was getting transferred to Seattle, and Joyce and I decided that's too far away. She was from Kansas, where her folks were. I'm from New Mexico, where they say my folks were. But you know, I don't know, was I beamed down or up? I forget which. But we had a headhunter call, and we accepted a job in Dallas. And we found out eventually that Glenda and Lynn and their family were just a little bit north of us. As I recall, it was a little bit south of Valley View, maybe right there on I-35 close by. And we got to strike up our friendship some more. And this included times where we would be at the symphony together. We would be eating dinner together somewhere out. You know, I recall that Lynn liked to eat quite a bit. Not volume-wise, but liked to eat out quite a bit, as we all do. And so it was a pleasure with, let's see, at least, well, somewhere around 60 years of friendship. And I will miss Lynn. I'm sure you will. Thank you.
Wow, it's hard to follow all those stories. Anyway, thank you to all of you who have come to share in the celebration of our dad's life. Many of you deserve double honors because you have been here twice within 2 months to the day as we celebrated our mom's life. How do I succinctly talk about a man whom I have known well for many years and who lived the equivalent experientially of about 5 normal lifetimes? That's my dad. You better get on board or get out of the way. It didn't matter which you chose, you were still in for an adventure. Kent never did anything. One of his sayings, but one that he lived, and he expected everyone else around him to remember. He may not have accomplished everything in life, but it wasn't because he did not try. How many of you have attempted all of the following or as many equivalents. Try out for a major university's basketball team. Audition as a soloist for the nationally televised Ed Sullivan Show. Run for state office. Earn enough flight hours as required to be qualified to compete in the United States astronaut selection process. Dad did attempt all these things and did not always make the final cut, but he was one of the best high school basketball players in the state of Arkansas. He did end up singing on the Ed Sullivan Show with the Oklahoma University Glee Club. And he also sang in various church and community choirs, and he enjoyed accompanying himself on the piano as he sang through many hymns, movie scores, and other music at home. One of my earliest childhood memories was my father singing "O Holy Night," or the Lord's Prayer with his beautiful tenor voice at the front of a long candlelit sanctuary. He sang and he played the piano last Christmas as the family sang Christmas carols. He was a great pilot, naval aviator. I think flying was one of his greatest joys or thrills in life. He loved pushing the envelope, whether in the air or on the ground. Get out of his way. Dad did not like excuses. He expected us to do our best or beyond. And he loved to win at our unfair expense at times. Some examples of these statements are, when I'd bring home a report card with all A's and 1 B+, what do you think he focused on? You got it. He did not want my excuses. What was I going to do about it? He would wrestle and pin all 3 of us kids at once, one in this arm, one in that arm, one between his legs, tickle us so hard that we were dying with no imminent escape, while he had a good belly laugh at our predicament. Then there was all 3 of us taking him on in basketball. What a joke. We would all be guarding him, and he would just back up over us, turn around, shoot his jump shot, swoosh. We learned early in life, life's not fair. I was talking to Dad's best man, Jim Luton, this past week. Did Jim make it today? He lives in Oklahoma City, and he's in a wheelchair, and he has Parkinson's, but he said, I'm going to try to make it to your dad's service, so I just wondered if he made it. Anyway, he had similar experiences to you. He was telling me about Lynn slaughtering him in ping pong when they were students at OU. Dad was good at ping pong. We all took him on too, but in fact, if any of you in this room beat him in a game of ping pong or playing him one-on-one in basketball, come tell us about it. You deserve a medal. Dad could be our biggest critic or our biggest cheerleader. It depended on what we were doing, how we were doing, and what he thought about it. Anyway, Dad enjoyed going and doing in life. He liked to travel throughout the U.S. or around the world. He liked to go to ball games. He and Mom were OU football season ticket holders until it became too difficult for one or both of them to do that. He liked watching basketball live or on TV. He loved driving in the car. We called it his windshield time, and especially if he was headed toward a restaurant that he had on his mind. He also loved his grandmother's, mother's, and wife's cooking, so he loved it all. Anyway, Dad loved reading and watching Westerns. He knew that you were not supposed to have idols, but I really think John Wayne was one of his. He loved going to movies. He loved going to hear good music, whether in Dallas, Branson, New York, or wherever. He loved a Ponderosa. He loved his dog Brownie, even though Brownie and everyone else didn't like each other. That dog would growl at us or bite us or whatever. But he loved Dad, and Dad loved him. Dad loved questioning. We called it interrogating kids and grandkids, even on topics we had rather not discuss. He loved family gatherings and others making a point to be there. As young kids or teenagers, he expected us to be in Sunday morning and evening church services and to attend youth group. Dad was a physically strong and accomplished man. Even with everything he and we were doing in life, though, he insisted on taking the time for daily family prayer and devotions at breakfast, although done quickly, before we scattered for the day. Mom carried out the task when he was not there to lead it. Dad was active as a church lay leader. He sang in the choir, and he served on several church boards. But by the time he reached his 40s, he felt God was actually calling him to full-time ministry. After being a star basketball player and a hotshot naval aviator, God had to humble and work on him in many ways to get his attention and willingness to obey that call. Dad had been a preacher's kid, and he knew there was little fame, glory, or money involved. But he surrendered to the call. He went to seminary later in life. He got his MDiv degree from SMU, and he started pastoring. This was not an easy transition for Dad or Mom. They had enjoyed their jet-set life. But being in the center of God's will was even more important. It was hard to see and imagine this strong and accomplished man as he was in his later years, or in these last few months. But there was a sweetness and a contentment we had not seen in him before, especially when he was more out of it. I will miss him, even in that helpless state. I will release him and say, Dad, fly on, to the arms of your loving Father and to the bigger thrill of your heavenly home. We love you. We will miss you.
I remember coming into the house, and there'd be this big smile, and it was, "Hey, how you doing?" That was Lynn. Hard-headed. Well, maybe we should say persistent. That's a better word to say today. Opinionated. Very. One thing you never had to worry about very long with Lynn was you never had to worry about what he was thinking. Because he was going to tell you very quickly what he was thinking. You never had to worry. It just never lasted very long on your mind when he was there. For some reason, I think I know now why, after sitting here, there's a story I've always thought I would share this day, either standing before all of you or share it with my family or whoever, but I'm a coach, and one day Lynn came down to the gym, and we decided we were going to play a game of horse. Well, I made a real mistake. I won. It was normal basketball shots, and somehow I won. Let's play again. The next 30 minutes, he never shot a shot that was farther than 4 foot from the basket. But he never missed. Right-handed, left-handed, underhand, this, that. I was wore out. I lost. He said, "You want to play again?" I said, "No." I don't ever, I didn't say it, but I thought to myself, I don't ever want to play with him again. And I never did. It was just, it was excruciating. But that's Lynn. That's the persistence that he had in things. It was so characteristic of him. Many of you know that God has always had you in his hand. And you're probably blessed to know that once you did come to know him, how much he had you in your hand before you came to know him. And that's kind of how it was with me and this family. I distantly kind of knew the Vowell family a little bit. And I'm in school at North Texas State University, now known as UNT. And I'm 19 years old, and this guy walks in my class, and it's Lynn. And I knew who Lynn was, but it's so strange that we happened to have a class together. And that day, I know now why, but Lynn said, "Hey, we're opening a steakhouse. Would you be interested in coming and cooking for me?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I guess I need a job." And so I did. And that was the beginning of a really amazing relationship that I've been blessed with over the years with this family. Finance class at North Texas. One night I was supposed to be cooking, and there was something going on inside of me, and I didn't really know exactly what it was, but there was a revival going on. So I said, "Lynn, can I get off tonight? I want to go to this revival." And he said, "Yeah, sure, go." And so I did. And that night in my bedroom, I met Jesus. And that's the that's, and obviously, we had a large part of that. There are so many other stories I could tell you about Lynn and Glenda and all the fun times and neat times that we had, and how important they are in my life. And this is really strange. I've just got to tell you this. This has nothing to do with this, but this piece of paper here, it says, and I don't know where this came from. I picked this up at the house. I have no idea where it came from. It says Lake Dallas High School. Glenda taught at Lake Dallas High School. And I don't know where this paper came from. But I picked it up today and just grabbed something as I was walking out to write on. And that's what I picked up. Carrie, do you know where this came from? I don't. But anyway, so that was just amazing. I got the news last summer that Lynn was not doing well. I knew what I wanted and needed to do. And I wanted to make sure that Lynn knew this. I wanted him to know that he was the person most responsible by his faith and his actions that will someday cause me to join him in heaven. And I wanted to share that with him. September 1977. I had graduated from UNT in May, and I had moved to Houston to work for Tentacle Oil Company. Prior to moving there in May, I had asked a young lady to marry me, and we had become engaged. One evening in September, kind of out of the blue, I got a phone call from her, and she said, "I don't want to marry you." And I was crushed, totally crushed. I managed to go to work the next day, and then when I came home to my apartment, I just basically collapsed on the floor. I literally cried a pool of tears on my face, and I was so anguished. I said, "Lord," I said, "I need your help." I said, "I need your help so bad, and if you don't send help to me, I'm not going to make it." Phone rang. Guess who it was? Lynn. Hadn't talked to Lynn since they were at my graduation in May. This is September. God has given an amazing gift, gave an amazing gift to me. And not only an amazing gift to me, but an amazing gift to my family. And that gift was Lynn and his family. And it's just an awesome guy. Just an awesome guy. And God does so much of those things in our lives. And we need to recognize them. We need to appreciate them. And we need to pass it on to those. You grandkids sitting over there, had amazing grandparents. And, my hope for my kids is that, and I think they are, they're better people than I am. And I hope that as great as your grandparents were and your parents are, my prayer for you is that you will be greater than them.
Certainly glad that, is this mic on? Testing. Test. Hello. I'm certainly glad that Mark Davidson became a part of our family because that man gave me my set of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. Forever grateful. We love your family. You guys have been a constant blessing. The song that Tawny and I are going to share now is one that, goodness, I guess we sang together 30 years ago. And Dad had said ever since that I want that sung at my funeral someday. So when the time came, Tawny and I went, okay. This was written by Lulu Roman. It's called The King of Who I Am. And I do believe that this is Dad's life statement.
My days are filled with laughter. My heart has known your peace. I've traveled far, still there is far to go. 'Cause in my heart there is a longing to look upon your face. Where you are is where I want to be. You are my King. You are the Lamb, Lion of Judah, Seed of Abraham, the Holy One, God's only Son. You are the King of who I am. Every road I travel down, you have walked before me. You made the light to shine out of darkness. I am looking for the day when I bow before you, lay my crown at your feet. Oh, Jesus, you are my King. You are the Lion. You are the Lion of Judah, seed of Abraham. You are God's only Son. You are the King of who I am. You are my King. You are the Lion of Judah, seed of Abraham. You are God's only Son. You are the King of who I am. You are the King of who I am. We love you, Daddy.
The kids have already shared some verses that I was going to share. Joshua 1 reminds me of my dad, where God tells Joshua, be strong and courageous, be strong and courageous, be strong and courageous. He says it over and over again. And there's a reason, because what was ahead was scary. Courage isn't noble if there is no fear. I never thought my dad was afraid. The older I get, the more I realize there may have been more to it than that. I'm glad for Dad's grandchildren, Mom's grandchildren, to learn more about them, because they were really out of the prime of their life by the time the kids came along, and a lot of them didn't realize the amazing lives that they'd lived. For my dad to think it was to do it. I called it ready, fire, aim. My sisters aren't disagreeing. Dad always focused on the windshield, and he never had any use for a rearview mirror until he retired, and at that point learned how to drive an 18-wheeler. You have to use the mirrors to back. You do. Dad always lived in a world of high risk and danger, particularly as a young man. He was a Navy pilot, naval aviator. You don't live very long as a naval officer in the aviation community before you know somebody who's no longer with you. And so as a kid, that all looks cool. It's cool to be a naval officer. It's cool to be a pilot. It was cool to be with my dad. I was 6 years old, and he took me with him to intramural basketball practice in Beeville, where he was a instructor pilot in F9s. And so, on an intramural basketball team, the instructors and the students can all play together. You have a squadron team, and my dad was always the talent on the team. I mean, really. He could make you look stupid on a basketball court. He wasn't just good at ping pong. He was the intramural champion at OU 2 years running. He almost made OU's basketball team as a walk-on, just showed up and made somebody else look dumb, but they wouldn't give him a scholarship. I'm not kidding. So he was, when I was at this basketball practice in Beeville, this little base gym, there was this really good-looking young guy, curly hair, that took a shine to me. I was a 6-year-old, and I could barely get the ball up to the goal. The goal's on the side of the gym. So I was doing the granny shots, trying just to get the ball up to the rim, and the kid took a lot of time with me. And the next week, my dad came home, and he said, that young man who was shooting baskets with you? And I go, yeah, I'm a 6-year-old. He goes, well, today he died. He was on a training flight. I don't know for sure what happened, but he said he was so calm. He just said, Mayday, 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 and then he was gone. That's the world my dad lived in, and he knew it, and he did it, and he never blinked. Not many of us understand that. And he wasn't doing it to show off. He was doing it because that's what he said. In Braveheart, there's this line, everybody dies, but not everybody really lives. We attribute that to William Wallace. It was probably Mel Gibson. He wrote the script. It's a great line. It's a true line. We're all going to die, but many of us aren't going to live. Now, the way my dad lived, ready, fire, aim, he made a lot of mistakes, but boy, he lived a lot of life. He lived a lot of life. Dad was never interested in playing it safe. Never. Ever. On the contrary, one of his weaknesses was a lifelong habit of overreach. But he was going to live. He never quit. Ever. Ever. He should have quit sometimes. Look at why don't you quit in this particular... He just didn't. And as a result of watching him never quit, I realized how much of life is just not quitting. It's not being the best. It's just not quitting. Oftentimes. He never let us quit. Never did anything. As a young man, this kind of drive was just pure ambition. That whole I'm going to be a millionaire by 30 kind of a thing. I'm going to go to the top of the pops. I'm going to be an astronaut. It was all sort of self-absorbed ambition. I realize today a lot of that was running from origins. He came up in a preacher's household. There was nothing glamorous, even though Lynn and Linda had great fun playing cowboys and Indians down by the creek bed in Ector, Texas. There was nothing glamorous about that. Dad, first day he got to Ector, it was summertime, so his dad wasn't off at Perkins yet. Dad comes booking it home, running with 2 boys running after him. That's what it was like to show up as a preacher's kid in a small town in those days. And as he gets to the house, he's safe. He's almost there. His dad's standing on the front porch with a belt, and he says, "Them or me." And so my dad turns around and piles off the porch into those 2 boys. They became his best friends. But, there's nothing cool, nothing glamorous. It was always hard. They were always moving to another town. And the truth was my grandfather was pretty mercurial. He pastored for 41 years. But at some point, pretty early on, he'd square off on the local patriarch in the church, and then it would be time to move. And so that's the way it went. And so Lynn and Linda were really good because they were on eggshells all the time. And so they sang and they orated and they stood around like this, and their mother, did all the stuff and filled all the communion juices and all that sort of thing. And the only time Linda's oldest child remembers seeing Olga ever lose her temper, because she was just a saint, was the time that Olga dutifully went down the row filling all of the communion cups. They were glass. There wasn't these disposable plastic things. And she gets to the end of the row and she looks back, and Kelly has been following her, drinking every one. Dad was ambitious to leave that behind. He was all-region basketball player. He was salutatorian of his high school. He was good-looking, great basketball player, great student. Just wanted to get out of town. But he knew what it meant to be a preacher in a small town. Dad was always and is my hero. And I was closer to him than anybody. One of my favorite verses is 2 Corinthians 4, 5 through 7. For we do not proclaim ourselves, We proclaim Jesus Christ as Lord and ourselves as your slaves for Jesus' sake. For it is God who said, let light shine out of darkness, who has shown in our hearts to give light in the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. But, what? We have this treasure in clay jars, so that it may be made clear that that extraordinary power belongs to God and does not come from us. Nobody sees the clay in their father's feet better than a son. So it was this hero worship, just all these things my dad could do that I couldn't do. All these things my dad could do that other people could not do, would not do. But then as you grow, you begin to see the clay, and a lot of times, that turns into almost a sense of betrayal. I thought you were perfect, because our heroes are supposed to be, right? My dad wasn't perfect. He really was relentless. He really was amazing. He really never quit. He really changed in the 70s. He got involved with the lay witness mission. He had done everything in the church. He'd been the council on ministries chair, administrative board chair, staff parish relations chair. He hired youth directors. He bought buses, and then, of course, they decided there was a ministry to go pick up neighborhood kids, because guess what the Vowells were doing early before church on Sunday morning? We were going through the neighborhood picking up the kids. Gets a youth minivan, and it just went on and on and on. Needed to sing to people in the nursing home. Guess what the Vowells did after church on Sunday? We sang to the people in the nursing home. What he was doing was running from a call to ministry. Some of you know him. And he really, really did change in his heart. It went from his own ambition to saying, this is what really matters. And it could be divisive in a church, even in our home church of First Gainesville. But people really changed. I saw that. I got to see people's lives transformed. So Dad surrendered a call to the ministry. But he was still someone who was going to say, it's here and it needs to go here. How many of you know churches that would really like to grow? They all say that. My dad made the mistake of believing them. And then he would move into a church. And there are more churches that need help than don't. And he would say, okay, so you haven't had Vacation Bible School in 20 years. Well, guess what we're doing this year? So you haven't had a confirmand in 20 years. Well, let's go find some. So you haven't ever had any kids go to summer camp. Well, they were going this summer. I'll be a counselor. And so initially, he'd preach and worship attendance would go up and new members would come in and people would go, but Dad was very linear in his objective. And knowing what I know today, he probably didn't get the buy-in of the leaders. And pretty soon, a year and a half in, the leaders were, I'm tired of being dragged down this road. And so then the district superintendent's phone would start ringing and then they'd move. And that's what would happen. I had a ringside seat to watch that, though. A lot of what I do and what I don't do as a pastor, I learned by being able to observe both the good and the bad in my dad. That's why a lot of preachers' kids end up being more effective as pastors, because you get a chance to watch other people's mistakes instead of just making all of your own. But what I did learn was that I should never be a caretaker pastor. What's a caretaker pastor? A lot of churches are dying. They're on this gradient here. And it's really, really hard to turn around a church that's dying. And so a lot of times what pastors will do is they will come along and they will take hold of the hand of the congregation and they will love them. I'm so sorry you're dying. And then they will hold their hand until they die. Because if you start talking about growing, if you start talking about reaching people, if you start talking about reaching beyond yourself, if you start talking about worship attendance, if you start talking about giving, then it's irritating. My dad actually ended up getting brought up on charges. I'm not saying this because I'm trying to embarrass him after he's gone, because he really didn't have a chargeable offense. Some colleagues of his called the bishop and said, it's not a chargeable offense to try to wake the dead. It's not. And he may have done that in an irritating way, but I think the bishop realized he didn't have a case. So Dad ended up in this meeting, one of those meetings where it's kind of a come to Jesus sort of a meeting. I don't know if Jesus was there. And And when he shows up, what happens is, it's hard to get rid of a Methodist pastor. And so sometimes what a bishop will do is they'll offer an appointment they know that they really can't take or wouldn't want to take. And so when he sits down, he listens dutifully. That didn't happen very often. And the bishop offered him a particular appointment. That appointment will remain nameless. And Dad just kind of calmly nodded, and then he handed the bishop an application. It was an application to become a conference-appointed evangelist. Now, what's a conference-appointed evangelist? Once upon a time, almost all churches would do revivals in the summer. It was built into your programming. Some churches still do that today, and it's still big in some traditions. But back then, you'd have a lot of people could almost make a living. My life was transformed by Jack Gray. Some other people's here lives were transformed by evangelists like that. This particular bishop didn't believe in that. It was kind of a bygone era, and then you can't control these sort of gypsy preachers that were going around all over the place. And so he didn't even believe in the concept of conference-appointed evangelists. He didn't believe in it. But he did believe in hell, and he wanted my dad the hell out of his office. And so he signed that application, and my dad became a conference-appointed evangelist. I can't lie, I'm a preacher. And that's when my dad learned to drive a truck, because there was no money in being a conference-appointed evangelist. For the next 10 years, he had to really hustle just to put food on the table, to pay his insurance. And the truth is, he retired because I was coming through seminary and I was about to be ordained, and he honestly thought he was going to stand in the way of my career. Now, I don't think that's what would have happened, but that's why he retired. Did I tell you my dad's my hero? My dad's my hero. He's hard to get along with, but he was my hero. My dad held on to broken things, and it used to drive me nuts. Even when I was a kid, I had to go fix fence, and I'd find this bucket of tools, and every single hammer, the head would come flying off. But he had an emotional attachment to that hammer, and I was like, Dad, why don't we get a new hammer? They really don't cost that much. When my parents moved from Denton to Frisco in spring of 2017, I found that hammer again. My dad couldn't even bend over and pack a box, and he comes over and looks over my shoulder, and he goes, what are you doing? I said, I'm throwing away these broken tools. He goes, those are good tools. I said, do you want to do this? He turns around and shuffles back into the house. That's the only time I've seen my dad quit in my whole life. I just cleaned out the top drawer of his dresser at the house. You know what was in there? The hammer wasn't there. There were 12 wristwatches. Every single wristwatch he had had that had died on his wrist was still there. I don't know if he'd look at that wristwatch and think of the altitude he was in the F9 or what. But none of them worked. There was his top dresser drawer was full of remote controls for machines he no longer owned. And so I was kind of doing this, and yeah. That was just some of the oddities of my dad as he was going and doing a million things in life. But here was another thing my dad did that was along the same vein. Every year at Christmas or Thanksgiving, my dad would disappear right before the big meal time, and he'd show back up with somebody who was alone. It might be Ms. Ruth Smith, who is an old spinster woman that he had invited to be a real estate agent with him in his business. And every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every New Year's Day, Dad would bring her to spend those holidays with us. It was his mother when she was really declining in health. Later, it was Aunt Patricia. I didn't want Aunt Patricia around when she was young. If you met my Aunt Patricia, you wouldn't either. She was broken, but she was not thrown away. My dad was at his absolute best when we were in a crisis. I went to flight school. I did a lot of things that my dad did. I went to OU. I went to flight school. I became a Methodist minister. I'm still me, and he was still him. But I went to flight school. I was going to be a Blue Angel. I mean, why not be the best, right? I was Lynn Vowell's son. I had my flight physical, and the first day I missed one too many letters with my left eye. And so they scheduled me for a retake the next day. And I lay in a BOQ room with the lights off and my eyes closed all day long. And the next day I missed one letter too many with my right eye. And that was it. I wasn't going to be a pilot. I was a naval flight officer. And it probably developed me in areas that I needed more development in instead of the stick and rudder kind of stuff that I liked. I had to be meticulous, and I had to learn to communicate, and I had to learn to run a crew. But I was devastated. And I called home. And I said, Dad, here's what's happened. And I said, I think I'm just going to hang it up. And he goes, don't. He says, I know you, and you're going to get beyond this. Don't quit. And that's just one time in my life when my dad said, all you have to do is not quit. Dad never gave up on broken people. He would irritate the heck out of people who weren't broken sometimes. But he never gave up on broken people. And what more is our God like than that? Because we've all been broken. And if we haven't been, it's just something that's about to come to us, or we're lying to ourselves. For by grace you've been saved through faith, and this is not of your own doing. It's a gift of God, not because of works, so that none of us can boast. My dad very definitely had feet of clay. And every child should be so cursed to have a daddy like mine. Thanks be to God for the life of Joe Lynn Vowell. Daddy, let's pray. Oh, Holy Lord, thank you for the gift of Joe Lynn Vowell. Lord, draw him to yourself. Help us to take the best of what he was. Help us to hear your call, to hear your formation, even in the times that he pushed and prodded and irritated and wasn't very gracious. Help us to say thank you. Thank you. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. The insert in your bulletin has 4 verses to a hymn that has a lot of alternate verses. Eternal Father, strong to save. It was in the 1964 hymnal. It was taken out in the next hymnal. It's the Navy hymn. It's the Navy hymn. It's a beautiful tune. I'm going to ask Sir John Tarver to play it through for us once. And once he's played it through, I'm going to ask that we stand together and sing it. And be blessed. Following the benediction, we'd love for you to come and just share your own Lynn stories with us. We'll be in the gathering area at the reception, and it's just going to be casual. Jesus said, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, you believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many dwelling places. If it were not so, what I've told you, that I go to prepare a place for you, so that where I am, there you may be also. I will not leave you orphaned. I'm coming to you. In a little while the world will no longer see me, but you will see me. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not let them be afraid." Following the benediction, the family will precede you out into the gathering area. Thank you. I know it's been a bit of a long time today. Hope you've been blessed. Let's pray together. Lord God, all that you've given us is yours. As first you gave Lynn to us, now we give him back to you. Receive Lynn into the arms of your mercy. Receive Lynn up with all your people. Receive us also, and raise us into a new life. Help us to love and serve you in this world, that we may enter into your joy in the world to come. Lord, Lynn, we give into your loving arms. His body we have already committed to the ground, earth to earth, ashes to ashes, and dust to dust. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.